They say karma takes her sweet time, but mine showed up in a three-piece suit carrying acquisition paperwork the very next morning after my girlfriend publicly humiliated me. Talk about express delivery service. I'm Mason Reed, 36, and until yesterday, I was just the unassuming bartender that Olivia Winters, 34, had been slumming it with for 8 months. At least that's what she and her high-powered marketing executive friends at Horizon Enterprises thought. What they didn't know was that my bartending gig was actually research for my next corporate acquisition. See, when you've built a $2.4 billion tech fortune by the age of 32, you develop a healthy skepticism about people's intentions, especially in the Boston dating scene where gold diggers outnumber actual gold miners in American history. The look on Olivia's face last night at her company's black tie gala, when I dropped to one knee with a modest, by my standards, 2-carat diamond ring, was something between amusement and horror. Like I'd just suggested we go camping in a Walmart tent instead of her preferred 5-star Aspen getaway. "Mason, honey," she said, her voice dripping with condescension while carefully positioning herself for maximum audience impact. "You're sweet, but let's be realistic. You mix drinks for a living. I'm on track to become CMO next year. I'd rather stay single forever than marry someone as like you." The eruption of stifled laughter from her co-workers sounded like a pack of hyenas who'd just discovered a Comedy Central subscription. One guy, Brad or Chad or whatever interchangeable name these finance bros have, actually spit out his champagne for dramatic effect. "Real classy, bro Shad." "You really thought I was serious about us?" Olivia continued, seemingly energized by her audience's reaction. "This was just a fun little detour, something different. You know, slumming it." I simply nodded, pocketed the ring, and walked out with more dignity than anyone who'd just been nuclear rejected deserved to have. The valet gave me that universal male head nod of sympathy when he brought around my modest Honda Civic, another prop in my elaborate charade. Little did he know I had a garage in Beacon Hill with a collection that would make the guys from Top Gear weep with envy. Here's where most rejected guys would crawl home to drown their sorrows in Jack Daniels and a 2 a.m. Taco Bell run. But I'm not most guys. I was about to execute the final phase of an acquisition plan that had been in motion for months. Horizon Enterprises, the company where Olivia and her pack of corporate wolves worked, was my latest target. The paperwork transferring ownership of the struggling marketing firm to my holding company had been signed that morning by the board. The press release was scheduled for 6 a.m. I slept like a baby that night, which is to say, I woke up crying every few hours. But not for the reasons Olivia might have imagined. No, I was crying with laughter every time I pictured the morning staff meeting where she'd learn who her new boss really was. As the digital alarm clock hit 5:59 a.m., I rolled over and opened my laptop. The Boston Business Journal headline popped up right on schedule. "Tech mogul Mason Reed acquires Horizon Enterprises in surprise $375 deal." The subheading was particularly delicious. "Reclusive billionaire makes rare public acquisition. Plans to personally oversee marketing division restructure." My phone immediately lit up with notifications. First came Olivia's text. "Mason, we need to talk. Call me ASAP." Then another. "Mason, please, I can explain last night." And finally, "This can't be real. Tell me this isn't real." I took my time showering in my palatial Beacon Hill brownstone, enjoying my imported Italian coffee, and selecting just the right power suit. Tom Ford, charcoal gray, subtle pinstripe, the kind of suit that screams, "I could buy and sell your entire existence without saying a word." I had my driver take the long route to Horizon's downtown offices, partly to build suspense, and partly because Boston traffic is God's way of teaching patience to the impatient. By 9:30 a.m., the entire executive floor of Horizon Enterprises was assembled in the main conference room, a glass fishbowl where everyone could witness what was about to happen. Olivia was seated near the middle, her complexion matching her white blouse perfectly. The nervous chatter died instantly when I walked in, flanked by my actual assistant and 2 corporate attorneys. "Good morning, everyone," I said, setting my briefcase on the table. "For those who haven't read this morning's business news, allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Mason Reed, founder of Reed Innovations and your new owner." The collective gasp was so strong it nearly triggered the building's fire suppression system. But Olivia's face, that was the real masterpiece. Remember in old cartoons when a character's expression would cycle through every possible emotion in 3 seconds? That, but in high definition and on a human face. Shock, horror, realization, calculation, and finally, a desperate attempt at damage control. "Mason," she attempted with a brittle smile. "What an amazing surprise, I had no idea." "Clearly," I interrupted, my tone pleasant but firm. "There seem to be many things you didn't know, Olivia. Like the fact that I haven't actually been a bartender since college, when I worked my way through MIT, or that the fun little detour you've been on was actually my due diligence period before acquiring this company." The room was so silent, you could hear the email notifications pinging on everyone's phones as news of the acquisition spread throughout the building. "Now," I continued, opening my briefcase, "let's discuss the reorganization of Horizon Enterprises, starting with the marketing department." The nervous twitching of Olivia's left eye was better than any applause I could have received for my performance, and as I pulled out the org charts my team had prepared, I caught the reflection of my smile in the conference room glass. The kind of smile that says, "Who's slumming it now?" The conference room had transformed into what I can only describe as a human zoo exhibit, titled "Corporate Prey Animals Sensing Danger." You could practically smell the fear sweat permeating through designer suits and blouses. I maintained eye contact with Olivia, while my assistant distributed folders containing the new organizational chart. "Before we dive in, I want to assure everyone that Horizon Enterprises will continue to operate in some form," I said, pausing just long enough to let that ominous qualifier sink in. "My management philosophy is simple: reward excellence, remedy mediocrity, and remove toxicity." Olivia's hand shot up like an eager third grader who finally knew an answer. "Mason, I mean Mr. Reed, I just want to say how excited we all are about this new chapter. I personally can't wait to show you what our marketing department can do under your leadership." The speed at which she pivoted from last night's "I'd rather die alone than marry a bartender" to today's "please don't fire me billionaire bossman" would have impressed an Olympic gymnast. Her sycophantic smile was stuck somewhere between genuine panic and a dental pain commercial. "Fascinating," I replied, tapping my pen on the table, "because last night you seemed quite confident about your professional trajectory without my involvement. What was it again? On track to become CMO next year, I believe were your exact words." A few poorly suppressed snickers erupted around the table. Nothing bonds a workplace quite like witnessing a colleague's career self-immolation in real time. It was just the champagne talking," she stammered. "Must have been quite the champagne," I mused. "The Dom Perignon of personality transplants." I flipped open my folder and addressed the room. "Let's discuss departmental restructuring. Finance, operations, IT. Your sections are outlined on pages 3 through 7. We'll meet individually starting tomorrow." I made deliberate eye contact with each department head, who nodded with the enthusiasm of hostages who've just been promised a bathroom break. "Marketing," I continued, finally focusing on Olivia's department, "will undergo the most significant changes, effective immediately. In fact, I'll be personally overseeing marketing for the next quarter to better understand our talent pool." Olivia's shoulders relaxed slightly. The poor woman thought she was getting a probationary period rather than a front-row seat to her own professional execution. "As my first executive decision," I said, smiling pleasantly, "all current marketing projects are paused for review, and I'll need complete access to all client communications from the past year. Particularly interesting will be the Westlake financial account, which I understand has been underperforming despite increasing their budget 3 times. This was the corporate equivalent of a knife twist. Westlake was Olivia's biggest client, and she'd been taking full credit for their account while blame-shifting the disappointing results to her team. I knew this because I'd had dinner with Westlake's CEO 2 weeks ago, where he'd complained extensively about Horizon's all-promise, no-performance approach under some marketing princess named Olivia. "We've had some challenges with Westlake, but," Olivia began, her voice climbing an octave. "We'll review the files together," I interrupted smoothly. "In fact, I'd like a detailed presentation from you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Every strategy, every communication, every invoice." The color drained from her face faster than water from a Boston public pool in September. An all-nighter wouldn't be enough to sanitize the mess she'd made of that account. "Meeting adjourned for now," I announced, standing up, "except for Ms. Winters. We need to discuss your specific role going forward." As everyone filed out, Throwing Olivia glances ranging from pity to barely concealed satisfaction, she remained frozen in her chair, like a possum playing dead in front of a particularly unconvinced predator. Once we were alone, I settled back into my chair and studied her for a moment. The confident, condescending woman from last night had been replaced by someone who looked like she was mentally updating her LinkedIn profile. "So," I said finally, "tell me about us." "Excuse me?" She blinked, confused. "Our relationship, the one you weren't serious about, the fun little detour you were taking with the bartender below your station, that relationship. Mason, you have to understand there's a certain image I need to maintain in front of the team, and when you surprised me like that—" "Olivia," I cut in, my voice dangerously calm, "we dated for 8 months. You brought me to your parents' anniversary dinner in Wellesley. I helped your brother move apartments. We took a weekend trip to Cape Cod, where you told me, and I quote, 'I've never felt this comfortable with someone before.'" She winced at each example like I was reciting her most embarrassing high school moments at a reunion. "Was any of it real? Or was I just your secret blue-collar boyfriend experiment? A walking punchline for you and your friends at Sunday brunch?" Olivia attempted damage control mode. "Of course it was real. I just panicked when you proposed. It was so public and unexpected, and you couldn't bear the thought of your fancy colleagues knowing you were serious about someone who makes drinks for a living," I finished for her. Which, ironically, is now the most honest part of our entire relationship. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Here's what's going to happen, Olivia. You're going to keep your job, for now, but you'll be reporting directly to me. Every decision, every client interaction, every comma in every email will need my approval." The relief that briefly flashed across her face quickly morphed into horror as she realized what this actually meant. Professional purgatory. "And one more thing," I added, standing up. "Your office is being reassigned. You'll be working from the desk outside my new executive suite. I believe the traditional title for that position is executive assistant, but given your senior experience, we'll call it special liaison to the CEO. You want me to be your secretary," she whispered, aghast. "Administrative professional," I corrected with mock seriousness. "Let's be politically correct about your demotion." I gathered my materials and headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Olivia, I'll need my coffee at precisely 7:45 tomorrow morning. Black, 2 sugars. I assume someone of your capabilities can handle that much responsibility." Her mouth opened and closed like a trout on a dock, but no sound emerged. "Don't worry," I added with a wink. "I'm sure this is just a fun little detour in your career path." As I walked out, I could practically hear the sound of her professional reputation shattering behind me. The executive floor fell silent as I passed, everyone suddenly fascinated by their computer screens or the ceiling tiles. They'd clearly heard every word through the glass walls, exactly as I'd intended. My temporary office had been set up in what used to be the CEO's corner suite. As I settled in, my actual assistant, Diana, appeared with my schedule. "Your 11 o'clock with the board is confirmed," she said professionally, "and Ms. Winter's belongings are being relocated as we speak." "Perfect timing," I nodded, glancing at my watch. "Let the restructuring begin." By 5:30 p.m., I'd already met with the board, reviewed the company's dismal quarterly projections, and begun drafting a genuine restructuring plan. Despite my personal satisfaction watching Olivia adapt to her new cubicle directly outside my glass office, where I could observe her like a particularly fascinating lab specimen, this acquisition was still a business decision. I needed Horizon to be profitable, not just a $375 million revenge fantasy. I was deep into the company's financial statements when Diana knocked and entered. "Mr. Reed, I have those files you requested," she said, placing a USB drive on my desk. "And I thought you should know there's a situation developing in the break room." "Situation?" I raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Winters appears to be having, let's call it a moment of candor with several colleagues. It's getting rather animated." I smirked. "Security cameras. Feeds already on your laptop, sir, second monitor. This is why Diana earned her 6-figure salary. Always 3 steps ahead." I clicked over to the security feed to find Olivia gesticulating wildly to a semicircle of her marketing team members, her back to the camera, but her body language screaming indignation. "Can we get audio?" I asked. Diana tapped a few keys on my computer. "Doesn't change anything," Olivia's voice came through, pitched higher than normal. "He's just on some power trip because I turned down his proposal. This is textbook workplace harassment. I leaned back in my chair, genuinely amused. Fascinating interpretation of events. The board will see it for what it is, Olivia continued on screen. He can't just buy a company to punish me for not wanting to marry him. That's psychotic. Once HR and legal get involved. Does she realize that HR and legal now work for me? I asked Diana. Apparently not, Diana replied with professional neutrality, though I caught the smallest twitch at the corner of her mouth. I watched a moment longer, as Olivia detailed her plan to build a harassment case against me, completely oblivious to the fact that her entire rant was being recorded on company property during business hours. Well, I sighed, closing the laptop. It seems Ms. Winters is digging her grave with remarkable enthusiasm. Would you like me to have security escort her out? Diana asked. I considered this for a moment, then shook my head. That would be too expected. No, I think we need to let this play out more creatively. I picked up the USB drive Diana had brought. What exactly did you find here? Everything you suspected, sir. The Westlake account has been systematically mismanaged. Ms. Winters has been taking credit for her team's work while blaming them for failures. There's also evidence she's been inflating billable hours and reallocating resources from smaller clients to prop up Westlake's numbers. So not just personally toxic, but professionally unethical. I nodded. Excellent. Diana gave me a curious look. If you don't mind my asking, sir, was any of it real? Between you and her? I paused, surprising myself with a moment of actual emotion. I thought so for a while. She was different when it was just us. Or maybe that was just another performance. I shrugged. Either way, it doesn't matter now. Diana nodded and discreetly withdrew, closing the door behind her. I stared at the USB drive, turning it between my fingers. I'd originally planned to use the Westlake disaster to humiliate Olivia professionally before firing her, but her break room performance had given me a better idea. Sometimes the most elegant revenge is simply giving someone exactly what they want, and then watching them choke on it. I picked up my phone and made a call to someone I'd been deliberately avoiding all day. Daniel, I said when the call connected. I hear you've been trying to reach me. Daniel Winters, Olivia's older brother, and a partner at one of Boston's most prestigious law firms, had called 6 times since the acquisition news broke. Mason, he responded, his voice carefully controlled. What the hell is going on? Olivia's been texting me all day about some corporate takeover and harassment situation. Interesting summary, I replied. Did she mention the part where she publicly humiliated me at her company gala last night? Or how she's currently organizing a fraudulent harassment claim against me? Silence on the line. I didn't think so, I continued. Listen, Daniel, I respect you professionally, which is why I'm calling. Your sister is about to do something incredibly stupid that could damage both your family's reputation and her future employability in this town. I suggest you intervene. I don't understand, he said slowly. Olivia said you two were just casually dating, that you blindsided her with a proposal and then retaliated by buying her company when she said no. I couldn't help but laugh. Is that the version she's going with? Fascinating creative license. Tell me, did she also mention our weekend at your parents' anniversary? Or the fact that she introduced me to your entire extended family as the one who finally got me to believe in relationships again? More silence. What do you want, Mason? Daniel finally asked. Honestly, I wanted to marry your sister, past tense. Now I just want to run the company I legitimately purchased without dealing with false harassment claims. And Olivia, that depends entirely on her next move, I said. But you might want to remind her that corporate security cameras have both video and audio capabilities. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair and contemplated my next steps. The pieces were aligning perfectly, but there was one more element needed to complete this chess game. I picked up my phone again and texted my friend Stephen Coleman, CEO of Westlake Financial. Dinner tonight? I've acquired Horizon Enterprises and found some interesting information about your account you should see. His response was immediate. The Cambridge Steakhouse, 8 p.m. This should be enlightening. By 7:30, I was changing into a fresh suit in the executive bathroom, reviewing the Westlake files one last time. Olivia had not only mismanaged their account, but had actively undermined her own team's good work to maintain her position as the indispensable client relationship manager. Worse, she'd been redirecting Westlake's considerable budget to cover holes in other failing accounts, essentially using their money to mask broader departmental failures. As I adjusted my tie, I considered the poetic justice taking shape. Olivia had rejected me for being just a bartender beneath her professional stature. Now her professional reputation was about to be systematically dismantled by the very man she'd underestimated. I stopped by her desk on my way out. She looked up, dark circles already forming under her eyes from the stress of the day. "Working late?" I asked pleasantly. "Just preparing for tomorrow's presentation," she replied stiffly. "Don't bother," I said. "Plans have changed. Instead, I'll need you to organize a client meeting for tomorrow afternoon. The Westlake account." Her face paled. "Westlake? But I haven't prepared." "No preparation necessary," I assured her. "Just be there. Conference room A, 2 p.m. "Mason," she said, lowering her voice and leaning forward with renewed calculation in her eyes, "I think we should talk about us. About last night. I was shocked and not thinking clearly. Maybe we could discuss things over dinner, just the two of us?" The desperation in her attempt to leverage our past relationship was almost sad. Almost. "Unfortunately, I already have dinner plans," I replied. "With Stephen Coleman. You know, Westlake Financial's CEO? We're old friends from MIT. Small world, isn't it?" The look of horror that washed over her face was worth every penny of the $375 million acquisition. "See you tomorrow, Olivia," I said cheerfully as I headed for the elevator. "And don't forget my coffee. 7:45 a.m., black, 2 sugars. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of her frantically reaching for her phone, no doubt calling Daniel again, or perhaps frantically searching for any Westlake documentation she could salvage. But it was too late. The game was already won, she just didn't know it yet. Dinner with Stephen Coleman proved even more productive than I'd anticipated. Over prime ribeyes and an obscenely expensive bottle of Cabernet, I laid out everything I'd discovered about Horizon's mismanagement of the Westlake account. Stephen, a straight-shooting Midwesterner transplanted to Boston's financial district, alternated between disbelief and rage as I showed him the evidence. "She actually diverted our Q2 marketing budget to cover that failed pharmaceutical campaign?" Stephen asked, stabbing a roasted potato with unnecessary force. "We specifically allocated those funds for our retirement planning division, and then blamed your unrealistic expectations in her internal reports when the numbers didn't improve," I added, while simultaneously taking credit for your account's challenging but stable performance in her presentations to the board. Stephen shook his head, swirling his wine. "I always sensed something was off. She'd show us these flashy presentations, but could never explain why our conversion metrics were stagnating." He looked up at me. "So what happens now? I assume you didn't drop $375 million just to expose one deceitful marketing executive, even if she did break your heart." "My heart's perfectly intact," I replied dryly, "and Horizon has potential under proper leadership, your account included." By the time we finished our whiskey nightcaps, we'd outlined a completely restructured arrangement between Westlake and Horizon, one that would be unveiled at tomorrow's meeting. Stephen was more than happy to play his part in what we were now calling Operation Glass Office, a fitting name given the transparent walls through which Olivia would watch her career implode. I arrived at the office at precisely 7:30 the next morning, intentionally early to prepare the conference room. Diana met me in the lobby with a coffee, black 2 sugars, and a knowing smile. "Ms. Winters arrived at 6:15 a.m., she informed me as we rode the elevator. "She's been frantically printing documents and making calls." "Admirable work ethic," I commented. "Shame it's coming about 8 months too late." At 7:43, Olivia appeared at my office door, coffee in hand, and the desperate smile of someone standing on professional quicksand. "Your coffee," she said, setting it on my desk with a steady hand. She'd clearly made an effort today, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, wearing her most expensive power suit. "And I've prepared a preliminary outline for the Westlake meeting. If we could go over it together, I think—" "That won't be necessary," I interrupted, not looking up from my laptop. "But Mason, Mr. Reed, I really think with my knowledge of the account—" "Your knowledge of the account is precisely the problem," I replied, finally meeting her eyes. "But we'll discuss that at 2. For now, I need you to call everyone from the marketing department into conference room C at 9:30. "The entire department?" she asked, clearly thrown off balance. "Every single person," I confirmed, "from senior directors down to the interns." "Oh, and notify HR and legal representatives to attend as well." The color drained from her face. "Is this about what I said yesterday in the break room? Because I was just venting and—" "9:30, Ms. Winters," I said, returning to my laptop. "That will be all." At 9:30 sharp, I entered conference room C to find Horizon's entire marketing department, 23 anxious-looking employees, along with representatives from HR and legal. Olivia sat rigidly in a corner seat, as far from the head of the table as possible. "Good morning," I began. "I'll keep this brief. I've reviewed the department's performance metrics, account management practices, and internal communications over the past year. To put it mildly, I'm concerned about what I've found." The tension in the room thickened like New England fog. "However," I continued, "I don't believe in punishing groups for individual failures in leadership, so today marks a clean slate for this department, with 2 significant changes effective immediately." I clicked to the first slide of my presentation. It showed a completely restructured organizational chart, with Olivia's name conspicuously absent from the leadership track. "First, we're flattening the hierarchy. No more siloed information or credit hoarding. Every client will have a 3-person team with equal accountability and visibility." Several employees exchanged surprised but hopeful glances. Olivia stared fixedly at the table. "Second," I clicked to the next slide, which displayed a young man's headshot. "I'm promoting Tyler Chen to department director." All heads turned to a startled-looking Asian-American man in his early 30s, who had been sitting quietly in the middle of the table. "Me?" he managed, clearly shocked. "You," I confirmed. "I reviewed all the internal memos and drafts of the Westlake campaign. Your original strategy was excellent before it was revised by upper management. You've also consistently advocated for more transparent client communication and collaborative approaches. That's exactly the leadership we need." Olivia's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "Tyler is a junior account manager. He's been here less than 2 years. I have seniority and a documented history of undermining your team, misallocating client funds, and falsifying performance reports," I finished for her. The room went deadly silent. "Which brings me to the third announcement. Ms. Winters, effective immediately, you are being reassigned to our new Client Relations Evaluation Initiative." "What does that even mean?" she demanded. "It means you'll be conducting detailed exit interviews with clients who've terminated their relationships with Horizon over the past year. We need to understand where we went wrong." I smiled pleasantly. "You'll be working from the auxiliary office space on the 2nd floor. Human Resources has already prepared your new workspace." The auxiliary office space was corporate speak for the glorified storage closet where broken printers went to die. "This is insane," Olivia sputtered, rising from her chair. "This is clearly personal. I've been Horizon's top performer for 3 years. Actually," I clicked to a new slide, showing performance metrics with her name highlighted in red, consistently below department averages. "You've been taking credit for your team's work while sabotaging their efforts to maintain your position. The documentation is quite thorough." I nodded to Diana, who distributed folders to the HR and legal representatives. "You'll find everything in here, including evidence of client fund misappropriation, which our legal team will need to review for potential regulatory implications." The lawyers exchanged grim looks as they scanned the contents. "This meeting is adjourned," I announced. "Tyler, please stay behind to discuss transition plans. Everyone else, thank you for your patience during this restructuring." As the room emptied, Olivia remained frozen in place, her career collapsing around her like a house of cards in a wind tunnel. When only Tyler, Diana, and I remained, she finally found her voice. "You can't do this," she hissed, all pretense of professionalism abandoned. "This is about us, about last night, and you know it." "Last night merely accelerated the inevitable," I replied calmly. "Your professional misconduct did all the heavy lifting. But if you believe this is wrongful demotion, you're welcome to consult with HR, though I should mention they now have copies of your breakroom performance where you outlined plans to file false harassment claims." Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly wishing he could dissolve into the carpet. "Tyler," I said, "could you give us a moment? Diana will brief you on your new responsibilities." After they left, Olivia and I faced each other across the conference table, the corporate battlefield where her surrender was now inevitable. "You know what's truly ironic, Olivia? I actually was just a bartender in college, worked at the Thirsty Scholar near MIT to pay my tuition before my first startup took off. I wasn't lying about that part." Her eyes widened slightly. "The difference is I was never ashamed of it," I continued. "While you were so ashamed of dating someone you thought was beneath you, that you were willing to publicly humiliate me rather than lose face with your colleagues." "Mason, please," she tried one last time, voice softening. We can work this out. What happened between us doesn't have to affect— Oh, but that's where you're wrong, I interrupted. It already has. The Westlake meeting is still happening at 2, and you'll be there to personally witness the consequences of your actions. I stood up, straightening my jacket. One more thing, you're no longer needed for coffee duty. I prefer people who are honest about their intentions. As I walked out, I heard her whisper, You've ruined me. I paused at the door. No, Olivia, you did that all by yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. The Westlake meeting at 2 p.m. was less of a meeting and more of a public execution, corporate style. Stephen Coleman arrived with his CFO and their entire marketing team, all wearing expressions that ranged from curious to predatory. Olivia showed up looking like she'd aged 5 years since morning, her makeup slightly smudged, hair losing its perfect styling. The confident stride replaced by the careful steps of someone crossing thin ice. I had arranged the seating with surgical precision. Olivia directly across from Stephen, Tyler at my right hand as the new department head, and the Westlake team flanking their CEO like well-dressed enforcers. The glass walls ensured the entire floor could witness what was about to unfold, a deliberate choice that matched Olivia's public rejection of me. Symmetry has always been my favorite form of justice. Thank you all for coming, I began. As you know, Horizon Enterprises has undergone significant changes since yesterday. Mr. Coleman and I have been discussing Westlake's account and have some announcements to make. Stephen took over with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just been handed a flamethrower at a marshmallow roast. For the past 18 months, he stated, Westlake Financial has invested $4.7 million in marketing services with Horizon. During that time, we've seen minimal ROI, constant strategy shifts, and a disturbing lack of transparency. What we didn't know until yesterday was why. He slid a folder across the table to Olivia. She opened it, and I watched as her eyes widened, reading the detailed breakdown of how she'd misallocated their funds. Ms. Winters, Stephen continued, can you explain why our Q2 budget for retirement planning was diverted to the Pharmatech campaign that wasn't even our account? The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Olivia, who looked like someone had just asked her to defuse a bomb using only dental floss and a paperclip. There were strategic considerations, she began weakly. Strategic considerations, Stephen repeated flatly. Like how you strategically told us our expectations were unrealistic, while telling your board our account was performing well, or how you strategically took sole credit for ideas your junior team members developed. Olivia shot a venomous glance at Tyler, who was studiously examining his notepad. Don't look at him, Stephen said sharply. Mr. Chen has been remarkably professional. In fact, we've reviewed his original campaign strategy, the one you scrapped and claimed was too basic, and found it excellent, which brings me to our decision. He turned to me and nodded. Westlake Financial will be remaining with Horizon, I announced, with 3 conditions. First, their account will be managed exclusively by the team Tyler assembles. Second, their contract is being amended with specific performance metrics and complete financial transparency. And third, I paused, meeting Olivia's gaze. Ms. Winters will have no involvement with their account or any other active client, ever. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of technical details and new arrangements. Throughout it all, Olivia sat motionless, watching her professional reputation disintegrate as methodically as a controlled demolition. When we adjourned, Stephen pulled me aside with a handshake that turned into a half-hug. That was better than the Red Sox crushing the Yankees, he murmured. Though I have to ask, was all this really worth it? Buying an entire company to expose one terrible employee? I glanced across the room where Olivia was gathering her things, a solitary figure now avoided by colleagues who hours earlier would have laughed at her jokes and praised her visionary leadership. The company was a solid investment, I replied. The timing was just fortuitous. Well, remind me never to cross you, Stephen laughed. You don't just burn bridges, you carpet bomb them from orbit. After everyone left, I returned to my office to find Olivia waiting, her expression unreadable. Congratulations, she said tonelessly. You've won, completely and utterly. This wasn't about winning, I replied, settling into my chair. Then what was it about? Revenge? Teaching me a lesson? I considered her question seriously. It was about consequences, Olivia, something I suspect you've rarely encountered in your professional or personal life. She laughed bitterly. So what happens now? Do I pack up my sad little desk and crawl away in disgrace? That depends on you, I said. The client relations evaluation position is real. It's also your chance at redemption, if you're willing to actually learn from this, rather than just plotting your next strategic advancement. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. Why would you give me any chance at all after what I did? Because unlike you, I don't make business decisions based on personal feelings, I replied. You're intelligent and capable when you're not sabotaging others to elevate yourself. That could still be valuable to this company. I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. You have until tomorrow to decide. If you want the position, be at your desk at 9 a.m. If not, HR will process your departure package. And what about us, what we had? She asked, a final attempt at leveraging our past. That ended the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for you, I said simply. Some rejections you don't come back from. After she left, I walked to the window overlooking Boston's skyline as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the financial district. The satisfaction I'd anticipated felt different than expected. Not the blazing triumph of revenge, but something quieter and more substantial. It turns out that the most valuable lesson from my 8 months as just a bartender wasn't about Olivia at all. It was about authenticity. I'd created the bartender persona to find someone who would value me for more than my bank account, yet I'd been just as inauthentic as she was, hiding my success instead of simply being myself. As I watched the city lights begin to flicker on against the darkening sky, I realized the irony. In trying to avoid being wanted for my money, I'd found someone who didn't want me without it. Sometimes you have to serve your own justice to find your own truth. And sometimes the most refreshing cocktail is simply seeing people exactly as they are. No mixers, no garnish, just the pure, undiluted reality. I smiled to myself. Perhaps it was time to start fresh, this time with no pretenses on either side. After all, the best investments are always in authenticity. And as for Olivia, well, some people learn their lessons the hard way. Others never learn them at all.